What's your best true spooky story? I have had several dreams similar to what I am posting. I've been a caver in Florida for about 13 years, since I was about 6, and have been to a lot of caves. Never been afraid before this to go in one. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started having this reoccurring dream. I would have it at least twice a year, always the same even though I would realize I was dreaming after the first few iterations. I would fall asleep and dream of being in a cave and going into this little hole in the bottom. Inside I would see a 10 to 15 foot long corridor about 2 to 4 feet high. At the end it would always turn left, and I always saw a bent red stop sign at the end, like someone ripped off the top 2 feet and tossed it in. But I would always follow the corridor. I would turn and walk past the sign despite being scared, despite many times knowing what was there, and the corridor would start descending, quickly opening up into a large vertical chamber with a path leading down in a corkscrew. Everything became blurry at this point, but it was always the same. I saw trash scattered on the walls. I saw the pit leading down to a curved floor. I saw things, undefined, animals or people or something else at the bottom. And I saw my family, each with one of the things, being tortured and killed. Every time. And I could never do anything. After I saw that, I would be stuck for a few seconds until I felt more than saw everything turn and look at me. And I would wake up. Not like a normal dream where you just drift to consciousness or a nightmare where you bolt up in fear, but like something pushed me out. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. So I have this dream multiple times a year until I turned 15. I did tell a friend about the dream before what happens next. My father decided to take us to some caves we never had been before. One of which was Dog Drop. It was likely named so because someone either threw their pet in there or a coyote fell in and the body was later discovered. Dog Drop had a roughly 30-foot rappel straight down to enter. I went down with my brother while my father waited up at the top. There was a hole in the ground. I started to feel uneasy though I didn't know why. So I followed my brother into the hole. I felt worse as I moved down. And when I looked up I saw the same corridor, the same turn, the same wall, the same bottles at the corner. And I instantly was hit with this overwhelming sense of nausea and fear and being watched and everything was screaming at me to leave. I froze and must have made some noise because my brother turned around and asked what was wrong. I managed to say I wanted to leave now and climbed out as quickly as I could, followed immediately by my brother. We packed up and left, never have gone back and never will. Haven't told anyone what actually happened, just said I wasn't feeling well, and they forgot pretty quickly. The thing that really makes it creepy for me is I have never had the dream again. Year after year I would have it consistently, but it just stopped after that. But I still remember it all. And I still feel afraid, almost an external fear, when I think of it. I lived in an old apartment in 2002. The place was built in 1900, so it was just over 100 years old when I moved in. The living room and kitchen were fine, but the bathroom and bedroom were unnerving, like I just always felt like I was being watched, especially in the bedroom if the closet door was open. Those unnerving feelings just became moderately uncomfortable as I settled in. I felt safe in the bedroom, but only if the door was locked. One night I was dead asleep when there was a loud bang on my bedroom door. When I got up the courage to get out of bed, I checked the apartment and all the windows were closed and locked from the inside. The door still had the chain secured. No one was in there. I mentioned the closet in the bedroom. I never liked going in there, and I never liked if the door was open. For some reason, in my head I would hear gasping noises. So for that reason, the closet stayed closed. A month or more after I was woken to the bang on my door, I was dead asleep. But something woke me up, and it was a pressure on me like being held down. It was pitch black in my room. I couldn't see anything, but I knew some was standing over me. When I could finally turn on a bedside lamp no one was there. After then I couldn't sleep in the dark, I had to sleep with a lamp on. That incident scared the life out of me. And after that the unnerving feeling of being watched intensified. Friends would come over, and comment about being uncomfortable in the bathroom like being watched. It became so uncomfortable for me, when I had the chance to move to another unit, I jumped at it. I packed up and got out. After me, several people rented the apartment, and they would move out within months. I became friendly with the building manager, and I told him that I felt the place was haunted. He kind of laughed it off. Years after, they were renovating the place, building manager was doing some painting in there, the building owner was there too. I went and checked out the apartment, and it looked nicer, it didn't feel as creepy. I got to talking with the building owner, and through the course of conversation he just throws it out there that a former tenant committed suicide in the closet by hanging themselves. He also mentioned that the original designer of the building lived in that apartment, and died in there. I wasn't mad when I heard that, but felt validated that what I experienced was real. When my grandparents bought their house for a family of 10, my grandpa found a fake wall upstairs. He tore it down to make more room for the family. Behind the wall were children's clothes and play toys, almost like they walked off the room in a hurry. My mom told me stories of sitting in her room and something circling the walls around her sounding like wallpaper being torn. When she moved out, my aunt moved into the same room. She would wake up with pictures she hung up laying on her chest in the morning. My cousins also have stories of hearing footsteps coming up the stairs and stopping outside their door in the middle of the night. I still don't go upstairs at their house because it's always cold and I get weird vibes up there. Even in my adult life I have scary dreams that take place in their upstairs. While at uni my friends and I ran out of booze. Hardly any shops were open because it was late on, so the only option was to walk the mile or so to the nearest 24-hour supermarket. Between the supermarket and the dorms we lived in was just row after row of suburban houses which all looked the same. As we were walking down one road we passed a field with a large campfire and some people riding horses around it. There were people playing musical instruments, and general sounds of a good time going on. The horses and fire, and the lanterns which were dotted about, gave it a very old-fashioned feel. Maybe 5 minutes after passing the field, now walking past houses again, one of my friends commented on how weird and out of place that gathering of people had been. My other friend and I had been thinking exactly the same thing, so, curious, we turned around and walked back to find out exactly what was going on. There was nothing there. Not just no people or horses, there was no field, just more and more houses. Even though we were absolutely certain we were on the right road, as we'd simply turned around, we walked up and down the neighboring roads too. We found nothing. We weren't drunk, though we'd had some drinks, and so I've got absolutely no idea what happened that night. 4 years ago, I lived in a very large farmhouse, that was converted into 2 apartments. The house was known as the Old Boys' Home. It was used to house boys with behavioral issues but was closed due to allegations of molestation. Anyway, I was living with my boyfriend and 3-year-old daughter at the time. My bedroom had a large fireplace that had been boarded up and painted over. I decided to push my bed up against it one day while I was rearranging things. It was like a headboard. That night, around 1 a.m. I had heard a small voice saying "Mom, Mom, Mommy." I had sat up in bed but didn't see anything, so I reached over my boyfriend trying to grab my daughter and put her in our bed. I kept feeling around and I was still hearing the voice but I couldn't feel her. My boyfriend woke up and turned the bedside lamp on, asking me, "What the hell are you doing?" I explained that Amelia was trying to get in our bed and I was reaching for her. There was nobody there. My daughter was sound asleep in her room. Then the next night came. Around 1 a.m. again my dog had started to whimper it outdoors, so my boyfriend got up to take him outside. You know that feeling in a bed when someone lies down next to you? Where the bed pushes in and there is a warmth in your back. I felt that, so I assumed my boyfriend had come back to bed. I rolled over, my boyfriend wasn't in the bed and I felt the fucking bed release pressure. Whatever was laying next to me has gotten up in that second. I moved my bed the next day to the other side of the room and I never had another incident in the 2 years I remained in that house. My wife and I were having a great weekend in Las Vegas when my father-in-law passed away in the early morning hours. We get the call and haul ass to get back to the rest of the family. After a couple of hours the family is all together and talking, sharing memories when we arrive. Shortly after we arrive it gets brought up, how are we going to share this news with our niece, who was in prison at the time. While trying to figure it out a call comes from out of nowhere. It's our niece and she asks what happened to Grandpa. She had a dream that he visited her and said goodbye. She freaks and calls us. Weird. I went to use the bathroom at work and when I entered, there was no one in there. The bathroom has 4 urinals and 4 stalls, 1 handicap, and I did not see any feet in any of the stalls. I took up my normal spot inside one stall and was doing my business, when I heard the sound of someone peeing into one of the urinals, but no one had entered the bathroom. The door is heavy and loud when it closes, so I would have heard someone entering. After a normal amount of time, the peeing stopped, and I heard a few footsteps. But the door never opened. When I finished up I did a cursory look and there was no one in the bathroom. It's a ridiculous story, but I definitely heard a pee ghost. I posted this in a thread a while ago but gonna do it again because it applies here. When I was in high school my uncle would throw me a couple bucks to help babysit his kids with my aunt. They lived in a 2-story house by the water, nice area. The kids were about 3 and 6. One day I was sitting in their den on my phone when I started to hear a baby crying. Thinking it was the 3-year-old, I headed to the bottom of the stairs to check and see if my aunt was up there dealing with it. I called for her a couple times with no response. The baby kept crying. I called for her one more time, and when I got no response I started walking up the stairs. Then I heard my cousins and aunt playing outside. All the hairs on my body stood up and I literally felt a chill run down my spine. I quietly turned around, walked down the stairs, got in my car and drove away. The baby was still crying when I closed the door behind me. A few years later I was drunk at a family party and told my uncle the story. He told me that he and his wife used to hear the baby too, and apparently the previous owners had a kid die of SIDS in that room upstairs. He's uber Catholic and had a mass said for the baby. He said after that it never happened again. Still gives me the willies when I talk about it though.